Welcome to the GreatBase Tennis Podcast. I'm Steve Smith, along with co-host Dave Anderson and a special guest, ARVIND ARVINDHAN. We're going from Dallas to Philadelphia. Episode 311. I've known Arvind as long as I've known Dave, so we're going 40 plus years. We get a calculator out. Let me go through a few things. And Arvind, you can tell me how far off I am. Let me just do some bio reporting here.
Just 35 years, Steve. Who's counting?
35, okay. So you have a lot more.
Close.
You've got a good head of hair too, Anderson. You totally lost it. With ARVIND ARVINDHAN, how do you pronounce it?
You're pretty close. Aravindhan.
Aravindhan. It's so easy
There
to
you
just say.
go.
It's just sort of easy to say your first name and then just add an N for the second name, though.
That's all. Yeah.
ARVIND ARVINDHAN. Madras, no longer Madras, but husband Carpagana, the scientist, researcher, father to Priya, father to Charlie, lifer, a junkie, tennis junkie. Grew up playing cricket, soccer, ping pong, but tennis was his go-to sport through his father. Highly ranked in India. I have down number 2, ITFs, 64, All-American college. Traveled playing in Europe, Asia, and the U.S. And then through some knee injuries and such, got into tennis, 1991, and forever worked for the great one and only Julian Krinsky. We'll have to talk about JKST. Teaching, coaching, number of mentors. I know you're very close to Mark Spann and others. But welcome. Let's talk about your journey in tennis. Tell us how you got started.
Well, Steve, you kind of hit it on the nail. Yes, I started playing pretty much every sport. And I would say I was about 10 when tennis was something I took to. My dad actually, very avid tennis player, club level player, but had so much passion for tennis. Being a veterinarian, besides reading and writing, his other hobby was really to play tennis. And he absolutely wanted me to be a part of this because he figured not just a life skill, but also I would have something to do between school and dark. That's when kids in India or anywhere run around and get into trouble if their life is not structured. So one thing led to another. It became a passion. And yeah, we're talking about, I'm 60 years old now. So 50 years later, I'm still hitting that yellow fuzzy tennis ball, talking tennis all day and being in the tennis business. Yeah, somewhere between the start and where I am right now, I ended up playing a lot of competitive tennis and took me around the world. A lot of life skills, met great people, and lots of mentors. Where do I start? My dad was my first mentor throughout life. I've had so many. I spent a good 10 weeks training when I was just coming off ITF season with Dennis Vandermeer and his crew of John Hill, Gavin Cox. I think he's still there in Hilton Head. And then moving along, JKST in 1990 was the first time I came here to work. Mark Spann, late Mark Spann. Now it's hard to say that because he's a larger than life figure, direct disciple of Steve. So I knew of Steve since 1990 and finally got to meet Steve in 1991. So, if you talk about role models in life and business, Steve, you are absolutely one of them. And Julian, I've learned so much from him, continue to learn from him. I always say I've had the best seat learning from one of the best. Not just a tennis coach, also a great businessman and a philanthropist. So, and of late, I'm running the Julian Krinsky School of Tennis. Julian's been retired happily in California and just shows up, shoots the breeze, and then he's back in California. But the program's running better than ever. We have some great coaches. And somewhere about 8 years ago, I started working with Kumar Ramanath and a few. Steve's known Ram, so I got that itch of working with a high-level pro in Grand Slams. So, I guess I kind of done quite a few things in tennis.
Oh, that's great. Let's go back to your dad. Would you two guys be old enough to remember All in the Family and Archie Bunker?
Yeah, we never missed an episode.
With what
He
he
never saw one.
what he used to say about veterinarians is they have to be so smart because the dogs can't tell them, the pets, the animals can't tell them where it hurts. Tell us more about your dad and his passion for tennis.
Well, my dad took up tennis after veterinary school, after he got his job, primarily because his father, my grandfather, told my dad, tennis is a rich man's sport. And, you should go play cricket or soccer. It's what we can afford. So my dad, his very, very first salary, went and bought a racket for 5 rupees. Back in the day, 5 rupees was still a lot of money, but right now you're talking about 5 cents to $1. Bought a tennis racket and found a coach, learned how to play tennis, and till the day that he passed, he played tennis 2 hours in the morning. Later on, he was in an accident and passed away. But, he enjoyed playing tennis every morning. That's where I got my start.
Tell us a story about, the Indian players, the different, the stratification, the different levels of society from a financial standpoint. So I think it's becoming more and more prevalent in the U.S., the haves and the have-nots. I remember the theory that one of the reasons that a lot of the top Indian players had so much finesse is they played a lot of younger players or other players that didn't have as much opportunity. And then you could go out and kind of entertain yourself by hitting drop shots and drop volleys. And tell us a little bit about, the ball kids and your situation and, leaving India. Just try to draw a picture for the listeners for that.
Yeah, absolutely, Steve. It's a nice story you said about, injuries played a big role in my ending my playing career. Injuries did have a part, but really the continental grip on my forehand had a lot to do with it too, because growing up in the wooden racket era and literally winning nationals with a wooden racket and then switching to a graphite racket because they all broke. So partially, I would say what you said about playing around with other players and whatnot, and playing with the markers, as they're called, the people who maintain the courts, because these are the people who are there at every club. They'll hit with you for hours and hours. The other thing is the humidity makes the balls extremely fluffy in India, and traditionally we had fast courts, even though I grew up on clay, but really with continental grips and playing with a very fluffy tennis ball, you can only smack it so much. So the touch game came much more naturally. And then when we're watching, being born in 1965, and then watching tennis in the early 70s, watching Ramesh Krishnan, his father, Ramanathan, Vijay Armitraj, these are all people who had so much racket skill. So who do you want to be like, right? TV wasn't a thing. We haven't watched Bjorn Borg play except once a year, Wimbledon final. That's when we get to watch TV, because nobody had TV back then, or not enough people had TV. So I would say that's why most of us have great hands. And I traditionally play with heavier, fluffier tennis balls because of the humidity. And that's why we all end up not having to be in 200-ball rallies, so we can end points faster. And so, and we all knew how to volley because, that's something, our role models of who I mentioned, everybody went forward. So that was very easy for us. And doubles was a very, very good way for a lot of us to get out of India, because most of us played very, very good doubles. We could, advance further in satellite tournaments. So I'm really dating myself. There's no such thing as satellites anymore. It's all challenges and futures. Back then, you had to play 4 weeks of satellites and then a Masters before you collected an ATP point. So we've come a long way.
One thing with entertaining yourself when you play. One time I was listening to George Basho speak. The late George Basho had so much to do with the USPTA. And he had a lot to do with Dr. Alex Mayer, and his 2 children, Gene and Sandy, became top 10 players in the world. So Gene was with George when he was making a presentation, and I asked the question, well, your dad had a system. Why did but you end up being such different players. And Gene had two hands on both sides, and Gene said, well, when he was really young, he was bored with tennis, and he would entertain himself with drop shots and topspin lobs. And Billy Martin, who arguably might have been one of the best juniors by the time it was the 18 and unders, but in the 12s, Gene Mayer beat Billy Martin 6-0, 6-0 in a final, so he could go out and entertain himself. But yeah, so many things. I'm going to ask you about Indian tennis, but go ahead, Dave. Your turn.
Let me ask you, what was your first racket?
My first racket was a Slazenger racket.
I would have thought you were a Dunlop Max Play Fort guy.
Okay, that was for the next stage. I did play with the Dunlop Max Play Fort. That was my next racket. My first racket was actually a metal racket, first racket, but it was not anything that they could even string there. And remember, markers in India, when I say markers, they're the people who maintain courts. They also act as coaches. They string a racket, not with a stringing machine, literally one of those handmade things. And then they'll tell you the intention. They couldn't string the metal racket. Somebody brought, and the string broke like on the fourth day or fifth day. So Slazenger was the racket I played with. And then very briefly Max Fly Fort. And then I actually played with an Indian racket called Simon's, which actually was a very good racket. They copied Slazenger. Before I ended up playing with the Dornay Allwood Pro. Not the Borg Pro, the Allwood Pro.
I know exactly the one you're talking about.
I know you do.
Arvind, before we jump up to Julian, I was listening to a podcast not too long ago. Julian, I think we forget that, Julian was a really good player. I know one time he just rocked up to a 60 USTA national tournament and won it, but I played Wimbledon, played the French. But I was listening to a podcast, and Alan Fox, who was a top 10 player in the world, talked about beating Julian in a final. I know Julian initially was with, he was teaching advanced players, and, David DeLucia, Lisa Raymond from the Philadelphia area, and some others. But tell us about, before your Julian Krinsky days, tell us about junior coaching, college coaching. What was that influence for you?
I almost want to say coaching, after I left India, I really didn't have a coach. And I'm being honest, because I started at Austin Peay. I had a partial scholarship to go to Wake Forest. Of course, I don't know the difference between Wake Forest and any forest at that stage. The only reason I chose Austin Peay was they told me they were giving me a full scholarship. And I had family in Nashville, so that was my only reason to pick Austin Peay. In hindsight, I should have gone partial scholarship, half scholarship to Wake Forest. And John Hill was very instrumental in trying to help me with that, at least connecting me with the coaches. But, luck would have it. The coach at Austin Peay, I don't wish to say his name because he's no longer, so it would be like almost dumping on him. Unfortunately, he got many offers. This is pre-internet area. We had no idea what a full scholarship was. So when we all arrived, we had a great team. And we went from finishing 8th the year before we got there, the Ohio Valley Conference. We finished 2nd, losing by 1 point to Murray State, coached by the legendary Purcell. And so, rags to riches story. But then we all got bills in the mail, and, we all owed half the scholarship. We all thought we had full scholarship. Meanwhile, the coach had just lied his way to get us. And, off we went. We all went in different directions because we all needed to survive. I ended up at Erskine College in Division, it's NAIA at that stage, and then they became Division 2. My coach, who just recently passed away, he was a former player, but really the bookstore manager. So he was really managing the team. We ran our own practices, which is great. But really, between leaving junior tennis, when I had a very, very good coach in India, his name is Robin Manfred, pretty much all the good players at that stage came from Chennai, because that was our hotbed. That's where Ramesh Krishnan is from, Vijay Armitraj, and even later on, Leander and Mahesh Bhupathi, all of them trained at the Britannia Tennis Academy, which Vijay and his mom started. So Chennai was my home. That's where all the It was Indian tennis. And after that, really the next serious tennis coaching was at JKST. Mark Spann and Adrian Cristelli, Julian's partner, and Julian. Julian and Adrian at that stage were not teaching. So really, Mark inspired me to become a tennis coach. I was not sure whether I wanted to be in tennis or be, I don't know, have an office job. Who knows? But really, the summer of 1990 is when I realized, there's more to this game rather than just playing and being frustrated because I can't play anymore competitively at that level. So I really sunk my teeth. Little did I know that I don't know a whole lot about tennis except playing and, give everybody a hard 60-minute lesson, give them a hard workout. Really didn't know what I was doing, but then things started to change. So, yeah.
Arvind, how about when you were 11, I think, born in 65, 74, when the Armitraj brothers get all the way out to the Davis Cup final? They didn't.
Absolutely.
They didn't play.
I know very little about it because we got to the Davis Cup final, and of course we had to forfeit because apartheid. And India did not participate in the final because South Africa was the opponent. It really crushed us, all us little tennis fans, because we got to see a Davis Cup match here or there if they had it in Chennai. But otherwise, back then, I still call it Madras, so I'll call it Chennai just because people may understand more. And it was a travesty. And 2 years later, VJ was up 2-0 on Bjorn Borg, round 2, and he goes on to lose the match. And we heard that on a commentary on BBC in a little AM radio, not FM, AM.
Wow, I would have thought it was all on TV. Like when VJ was 19, he beats Laver. Yeah, he was just huge in America. But you weren't really seeing much of VJ on Indian TV.
We did not have sports on Indian TV at that stage, Steve, in the mid 70s. The very, very first live match that I saw, actually went to a friend's house. We didn't have a TV at that stage because it wasn't very common. We went to watch the women's singles. Martina Navratilova won her first Wimbledon, beating Chris Evert. And then, they're talking about how muscular she was and blah, blah, blah. And she just served and volleyed Chrissy out. And the very next day, we got to see Borg beat Connors. And that was my first TV tennis. And, and they only showed the finals. And it was like a ridiculous time. So they play at 11 o'clock in the morning, so which is, late in the evening. And then really, that was my first look at. I've been to Davis Cup in Chennai, so John Alexander, Ross Hayes, Jeff Masters playing against VJ, Premjit Lal. There's a name I'm throwing to you. Ramanathan Krishnan, Ramesh's dad, was the coach. Anand Armitraj was playing singles as well as doubles. So that was another experience that I could never forget. Also seen Mal Anderson and an earlier set of Davis Cup. So that's really the only exposure we had in India to watch professional tennis. And like I said, TV was not a thing. They had highlights, and then they showed you some highlights.
Yeah, I remember with 1975 where Arthur Ashe beat Jimmy Connors. It wasn't on live. And shortly after that, might even been the next year, or it was Breakfast at Wimbledon. But yeah, even as late as 1975, we were in the States not watching it live.
Yeah.
What about the Mrs. Armitraj? Tell us about Mrs. Armitraj.
Maggie Armitraj,
yeah,
I would say, is probably one of the most influential people in Indian tennis. She really was the driver behind the Armitraj family's success. The dad, Robert Armitraj, I met him, very nice man. But VJ's mom, Maggie, she was the one who was really spearheading. VJ was a swimmer, and they needed to get him out of that area because of his asthma. He needed another sport. And that's why he caught on to tennis. So obviously, if one kid's playing tennis, everybody else is playing tennis. And the younger brother, Ashok. And Vijay took to it very naturally. As you know, very elegant tennis player, very, very athletic, very smooth, great hands. Couldn't stay fit. That was his biggest problem. I think if he had worked as hard as Leander Paes had done much later, I think Vijay wins a couple of Wimbledons. Plus, in '74, was that right? The year they boycotted, Jan Kodesh won Wimbledon. Vijay was in the quarters. With a match point, he hit an overhead over the baseline, which kind of changed the match around. And Jan Kodesh goes on to win Wimbledon. I don't know whether Vijay would have won, but at least he could have won that match because he had a fairly easy overhead.
Oh, he got to the quarters twice. I used to watch him take lessons from Roy Emerson at the John Wayne Tennis Club. Charismatic, I think one of the best speakers in tennis. But I was told Mrs. Armitraj was a great disciplinarian, and what they wanted to do in Indian tennis is the lifestyle she, the family, how she, attitude of the household brought her kids up. They wanted to have other Indian families understand that. Dave, I don't know if you were at Tennis Tech, the program we ran in Texas for tennis teachers, Tyler Junior College, but Simon Rogers, he worked for Britannia Armitraj Tennis. So I remember he wanted to talk to me about an interview, and I sat down with him, and he set up an office time, and I said, "Oh, you don't need to be nervous about your interview." And he goes, "Well, I got hit with Rod Laver." And I said, "Oh," but his father was CEO of Nabisco at the time, and Nabisco is the sponsor for the ATP circuit. But Simon, I know Leander Paes invited him. They went together to the Atlanta Olympics. Simon was very humble about it, but Simon was actually one of the instructors and spent a lot of time with Leander Paes.
The Britannia Armitraj program, by the way, Britannia is a unit of Nabisco. Britannia is an Indian cookie and biscuit company which did the sponsoring. Obviously, Simon Rogers was the reason why they were able to get that. And it was the tennis courts were my high school's tennis courts. Madras Christian College High School. That's where Britannia Armitraj tennis was. And we had 2 courts, hard courts. There's only 2 hard courts in the entire city of Chennai. Otherwise, they were all clay, topped with cow dung, which you guys may have all heard about. And then the 2 hard courts were in such bad shape. But of course, we graduate, and then BAT comes in, and they lay beautiful 2 courts. We got invited to go hit with these kids when they were 12. This was even the group before Leander Paes got and Asif Ismail. Forget those guys' names now. They were pretty good, but they were not as good. So we had to go practice with them, beat them up. And, Maggie was so thankful that we would do this because we were, at that point, 5 or 10 players in India were all from Madras. And then we would go out and hit with those guys, which was a treat for them. But, we thought we were just doing a favor because our hope was we'll get to meet Vijay Armitraj or hit with them, but he never showed up.
I've never really listened to him as a commentator. I guess you could research that on YouTube. But he does for Indian TV. Is that right?
He does for Star Network, which is Murdoch owned, and it's a big Asian network. Vijay got into the Hall of Fame last year or the year before, I forget if my years are mixed up, as the ambassador for the game, not for his tennis. Leander got into the Hall of Fame at the same time because of his 18 majors in doubles and mixed. But Vijay got in as the ambassador to, I think he was the UNICEF or UNESCO or UN, I forget, one of the United Nations bodies as ambassador for Asia, for sports, and then more so tennis. He promoted tennis all over Asia. At that point when he came up, there weren't any Asian tennis players. Vijay was the hero. I mean, people forget Ramanathan Krishnan got to the semis of Wimbledon twice, and he was in the top 10 briefly. But you're talking about the 60s, so Vijay had more coverage, and obviously Vijay also was very charismatic. As you know, he was in a James Bond movie, Octopussy. And he's done a lot for the game in Asia, even more than just India. Now he's focused a lot on India, but in the 80s and the 90s, as he wrapped up his playing career, he was very instrumental in running camps and exhibitions all over Asia. And so, yeah, he deserved it.
No, his game, I know he was not intimidated by Connors. He used to just tell people, you can attack his serve, and he would play approach shots off Connors' second serve. But yeah, fitness, he used to practice with his shirt off, and he was not of course, it was a different time. People were not in the gym like they are now, but the brothers played great doubles. I know Ashok has been very successful in the movie business, but he also, I mean, so there was three brothers.
He was a good player.
Yeah.
He was a good player. And, one family to produce three awesome tennis players in VJ was definitely a top 30 on a regular basis. Probably had talent to be top 10, but, body has to be, which is really a knock on Indian tennis, and it's been always, except Leander Paris was the only outlier of the entire bunch, and Rohan Bopanna much later.
Yeah, no, his tennis, though, is really fun to watch. I had a chance to be around him quite a bit. I remember you probably both saw the work Vic did with filming his strokes, especially his serve.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
He had a cannon for his serve.
Yeah. Especially above, over the overhead views are fantastic.
And then Davis Cup, India got to the finals in '87. Who were the players then?
Vijay, Ramesh Krishnan, predominantly. That's it. I think Leander was on the team. Well, maybe not. I think he was very young at that stage. Probably it was 1983 when I graduated high school. He was about 13. So I have a feeling he probably may have been on the team because he's been on the team since he was 16 or 17. He probably has all the Davis Cup records because he played forever. Almost into his 40s.
Dave Anderson, you would remember Dave. John Lafferty spent some time with us in Tyler, Texas, and they played Junior Wimbledon again. And I mean, Leander played for over 20 years, right?
Yeah, Leander also won Junior Wimbledon. People forget.
Yeah.
No, he had and he's won a ton of Wimbledon titles, doubles with Mahesh Bhupathi, and then he may have won with somebody else too. But then he also won with Martina Hingis and Martina Navratilova. Very, very, very decorated career.
No, what a great game, especially with what's happening with doubles. Raven Klaasen, he's doing some things with Indian players, correct? Are you aware of that?
Yes, it's actually Bopanna who brought him into the loop. The whole idea is to build a champion. So we figured out we can't get singles players because it is much more difficult. And so we have a lot of guys in the doubles in the top 200. There's probably about 15 of them. And in the top 10, there's probably 4 or 5. Sorry, top 100. And with Bopanna retiring, reaching number 1 at the age of 40 or 41, whatever it is, it's just such a moment for a guy who's done everything right. And he's doing so much for Indian tennis now. So I think he's the one who pulled Raven in to get the preseason camp going. And I know Raven's working with a lot of players. And yeah, it's great. I mean, as you know, Raven's very close to you. Non-Raven, what a kind soul and what a knowledge.
Yeah, really, with Raven, it'd be great for Indian tennis or any federation to the bottom of the triangle to help the 6-year-olds, the 8-year-olds, because of that. He spent almost 5 years with us, so he has a very good handle on basics. What little kids need. Of course, that's that carries up all the way to the tour, but it's certainly it's a different level, but still that's of interest. I think Vijay Armitraj is the element of risk. That's one thing that's gone away. But yourself starting with continental grip and wooden racket. How much of your tennis was on grass when you were a kid? Just like with tournaments
Not enough,
and that.
Steve. I really enjoyed playing on grass because by the time I became a junior tennis player playing tournaments, there were no more grass courts in southern India because we just could not maintain it. The weather was so bad. So Indian Tennis Association, like anybody else, was called the All Indian Lawn Tennis Association. So we removed lawn, I think about 35 years ago. So Delhi, Calcutta were the places where you played a lot of grass court tournaments. I really enjoyed playing on grass because my game relates very easily. Shorter back swings. I loved going forward, touch. And unfortunately, it was on the way out. I think right now there are only grass courts in Calcutta. I don't even think the entire Delhi DLTA, they used to call it Delhi Lawn Tennis Association. They had about 25, 30 grass courts, and there was great atmosphere. But I think they're all hard courts now. And Calcutta, I think, has 2 clubs with grass courts. And maybe there are odd grass courts here and there, but no real clubs have grass courts anymore. So I did not grow up on grass. I grew up on clay, but hard clay with that cow dung top. So a lot of us could go forward. It was not the red clay, which I really enjoyed playing in Europe, but we all knew how to shorten points, go forward, it's just, things that we did. So grass translated very, very well. I got to play a lot of grass court tournaments in Holland, which was fun.
Dave, question, go ahead.
Well, Arvind, one of my close friends throughout my whole juniors from 12 to 18, he was 2 years older, and we just reconnected in person a few weeks or about a month or two ago. But his name was Raman Jayapathy. Your story reminded me of his a little bit. He was a very, very good tennis player, 2-time NCAA or NAIA champion at Gustavus Adolphus back in the 80s. My family didn't have a lot of resource. Raman, his father was a physician, and they did. So I would travel with Raman and his mother. And it was good preparation for me because of the times that I'm in now in regard to junior tennis. As you know, there is a strong high number of junior tennis players from that ethnicity. And Raman, I look back at why he was successful, and he's a very, very successful attorney now. And like you, he was out there playing the tour for 3-4 years. But his mother was a tremendous driving force. And this is really just kind of leading up to why do you think in the last, here in Dallas anyways, and when I travel to national tournaments, whatever, there's a really strong impact being made right now by young Indian athletes playing in the sport. And some of the draws are just dominated in number by them. And what do you attribute that to here in America? And is it that popular back home in your native country?
Absolutely very popular in India. I would actually put cricket is way on the highest end. And after that, something which middle class and upper middle class reaches to is tennis. Because tennis has been around in India for centuries because the Brits brought that back in the day. So even though we have not produced because the infrastructure is a problem, the tennis association is a problem, yet the number of tennis players in India is quite astronomical. It's played just because great exercise, it's just part of the culture. After a certain age, you can't play soccer. People play badminton, but after a certain age, they don't play badminton. So tennis has always been a sport. Now, why is tennis so popular, especially in America, among the Indian community? Most Indians don't think they can afford tennis when they're in India. When they come to the U.S., be it an IT job or be a lawyer or be whatever, now all of a sudden the means increases. When the means increases, they're able to contribute towards their son or daughter's tennis lessons. Indians also thrive in individual sports because traditionally we keep our head down and watch the ball. We're not out and about trying to figure out. Physically, we're not very big. So soccer is not part of the culture in India. Even though they watch soccer, they play soccer, it's not part of the culture. So we, now Indians are taller, but traditionally Indians are not big. And therefore, they didn't gravitate to the American sports. What comes easy? What was always fascinating to the dads and the moms when they were in India? Tennis. So when they get here, they start playing tennis. All of a sudden, there are more courts available, more opportunities. So they also figured out the kids can get better faster in tennis because it's much more even playing field in physical size. That's why. And also, Indian kids generally will outwork some other ethnicities because work ethic is something that we grow up because that's one way you get out of India. And I don't mean when I say get out of India. Getting out of India in the 80s meant you searched for a better life. India is a very, very successful country right now. But it's just the work ethic is there because when there's a large population and you need to get ahead in everything you do, you just outwork everybody. And that's why our parents put their kids in tennis, they get successful, and they're not there for the hit and giggle. They mean business. When I say what they mean business is like after they put the kid in tennis, like where are we going with this? Is this just high school? Can you get into high school? And the kid's showing really good promise in tournaments. Can you get into college with this? So, they're always trying to outwork. And hence you're seeing this tremendous burst of population playing tennis and doing so well in junior tennis. And it's starting to relate in Nishesh Basavareddy. It's a great story. Rajiv Ram, all Indian immigrants who are doing quite well. I think there was another girl back in the 80s, late 80s, mid 90s, Lakshmi Pururi. She was probably the first Indian American who got into the main draw of majors. So, it's just something we're good at. Now that we're getting into golf now. You see Sahid Sigala, Akshay Bhatia. There's quite a lot of them. Even the guy who won the U.S. Open right here in Philadelphia, Aramik, which is right around the corner from my house, he's of Indian descent, Aaron Rai. So there's a ton of Indians playing golf as well. We will take the individual sports a lot faster than team sports.
One thing to add to that, the Book of Lists, the Indian population are at the top of many, it would say for minorities, but just in general, they're very high with work ethic, humility, intelligence. The income of highly educated, the Indian population here. I tease, today we had a classroom with, say 20 people and a couple adults, let's say half dozen, 2 adults, 4 kids, Indian kids. So I said, okay, let's get political, let's get racial. And I said, why won't you find Indian kids? I mean, it's an exception to the rule if you do. Why don't you find Indian kids in sports where you have to wear a helmet? And I just simply said that the parents are too intelligent. I mean, just think about it. I mean, the comics have a little bit of fun with that. If you're putting a helmet on, that means something bad can happen. So, I mean, I think of American football. I mean, I love American football, but, the way it's headed, no pun intended, but, there's like human missiles and what's going on with concussions. But the work ethic, I do think, though, here in the States, a lot of the Indian families, it's first generation sports. And I think that's coming back to Maggie Armitraj, that was the mission to teach families on how tough you have to be, how disciplined you have to be. And it's very difficult. So I do think a lot of times when Indian families, obviously you don't want to categorize, but when they get in, they have to, they have to figure it out. Like I lived in Toronto for 2 years, and hockey is a religion, but a lot of the Italian families, and again, I've been in hockey forever, so you can just tell if it's a first generation. And that's one thing that's important for everybody in tennis. Actually, that's our focal point on this podcast, is everybody in tennis, is many times parents are going down the road for the first time. They haven't really been involved in sports. We had a gal visiting here not too long ago, and I was telling her, you have to remember you're from a football family. It's like Nadal is from a soccer family, Hewitt's from a Australian football family, but they're from sport. But if they're new to the sport, regardless, the learning curve is a little slower. That's where they just have to be very, very eyes open and observant to what it really takes to get a tennis player from point A to point B. Go ahead, Dave.
Yeah, I was just going to say, it was interesting catching up with my friend. He still devotes a lot of any free time he has just pro bono to the tennis up in that upper Midwest area. But he said he felt like tennis was a project around his house. And I'm just sharing his thoughts. And then he said where he really developed a passion for it and realized it was a sport was around our house. And he would tend to spend more time in our living room than his own. So even though he did say that his parents were such a driving force in it. And I got to say from my experience in coaching that, I always tell people, it's a game, it's a sport. It's not a math project. And, there's a hard work to it that is just, anything you want to be good at is hard work. But I see some of the kids culturally, again, not 100%, nothing is, but where it just becomes this kind of a family project, and the passion for the sport, I wouldn't say is there. And can you comment on that, Arvind, based on your background or what you experienced?
Absolutely, it is a family project. Yeah. So the unsung hero here, often everybody asks me why I took up tennis. Okay, it's my dad for sure, but the real driving force in my family dynamics is my mom. My mom, who never ever played tennis because she's 81, very healthy 81, who's very active, busy, does yoga every day, plays the violin, blah blah blah. You name it, she's active. And anyway, so she was really the driving force. My dad introduced me to it, took me to it, never ever commented on how I played except if I had a bad behavior episode. But however, my mom lived up and down with my emotions. But she was also the one who insisted that, I had installed the discipline that I ended up having because she would wake up. I had to exercise. What exercise? She didn't care. I had to exercise. I had to shadow practice. I would shadow swing 100 forehands, 100 backhands, 100 volleys on both sides, overheads and serves. All this before I headed out to tennis. My mom, who's not often talked to because referred to because she's not a tennis player, but she lived to motivate me, push me, discipline me. So it is a family project, Dave. You'll never, maybe you won't see the mom or one parent on the scene all the time just because they're busy with the other child. I'm an only child, so they really didn't have a whole lot of choice. But it was really a family project. I missed a lot of holidays, family get-togethers because tennis was that important. I had a lot of roadblocks because this is a path nobody in my community or my relatives ever took. Most people would send my parents notes, paper clippings, of how athletes will end up with nothing in their lives because of this killing my future. My mom's sister who lived in Nashville, and she and her husband, who was a professor, he was sending paper clips to all these NBA players who are now druggies because, they didn't have anywhere to fall back. Why are you wasting the kid's future putting him in tennis? And meanwhile, they never put me in tennis. I put myself in tennis. They introduced me to tennis. This is what I wanted to do. The smartest thing my parents did was they stood by in spite of all the family pressures because they wanted me to continue with what I felt was my passion. So, both parents, Indian households, and again, things are changing. Indian kids have a lot of discipline because, parents are usually very together. Not a lot of divorces. Doesn't mean one cannot be successful or unsuccessful, but it is a family project, as you said, and they're very involved. And sometimes it may be involved to just give the discipline or to get the drive. My mom never commented whether I had a forehand or a backhand or this or that. And finally, I think I always played to please my mom because, she did everything for me. Even though maybe I haven't shared that with her. Maybe this podcast will share that to her. I even remember when I came back after winning nationals in doubles, my mom's comment was, "But you lost second round in singles." But that was by no means that she wasn't proud or anything like that. It was just that she was the one who was pushing my. Till today, she pushes my buttons, and I will respond in a positive way.
Arvind, what about you could comment on academics? IITs, it's not just with Indian families. I'd say it's Asiatic. Academics is number one. People on this podcast have heard it too many times. The Indian grading system: A is average, B is below average, C can't have dinner, D don't come home, F find a new family. But with that, you just know that the grandparents are involved with the academic side. Could you just comment on the history of that?
It's a social stigma, Steve. It's a social stigma. If you don't do well academically, you've really bypassed your entire future. Is what the right doors don't open for you because you have given up. In fact, one of the biggest gripes coaches in India have is when a kid gets to the 10th grade, they start to disappear. If they're not a serious tournament level player, even serious tournament level players will start to disappear because the first major exams come in 10th grade. When you finish your 10th grade year by sitting for these board exams, and once you finish that, then you get into the 11th and 12th where you start to specialize. And then in 12th grade, you have another board exam. So what happens is that people spend more time with their education because that's what's ingrained in them. So it's not just grandparents, it's just societal pressure. What do you do? What do you do if you don't have, the jobs which are really considered the top-notch jobs in India, be a doctor or be an engineer. After that, maybe a lawyer. Meanwhile, the businessman runs everybody, which is changing. Culture is definitely changing, but still, that's why academics, coaches will tell you, oh my God, this kid is such a good player. But I have a feeling by the time he's in 10th grade, his parents are going to pull the reins back so that he can hit the books.
Let me ask this question. I think of other countries, England, Ireland, Germany, in years gone by for sure. The system academically didn't really allow for late maturity. In other words, a second chance. Like say the British, the A levels and the O levels. Is that what you mean with the testing? Is that there's a cutoff? If you don't do a certain standard, your options, your opportunities are limited.
Well, because you're talking about right now, you're talking about 1.2, 1.3, 1.4 billion people. So when you're talking about that many people, there's only so many jobs. If you're talking about so many jobs, how do you cut off? This whole American college system, which I actually like. Who's deciding where you go, right? There's an academic counselor or like a admissions counselor who decides. I mean, really? I mean, you're going to tell somebody how good they are, or they're good enough to get into your school because based on your essay and your SAT scores so in India, what they do, I don't know whether it's the right system. It's a system they use. What they do is they have a nationwide testing system because there are 2 or 3 school systems. So when you get to 10th, you're tested. And you're tested, and based on how you do, that's how you're given opportunities to further. You're still passing on through to the next grade, and if you don't get clear the 10th, then you stay back another year. The whole concept of holding a kid back is a novel concept. It's a never heard of concept in America. It's a very common concept in India. If you don't make the grades, you don't get to go to the next grade. You're held back because you're not qualified. Why would you be there?
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, kids definitely get mainstreamed. In other words, they just get shoved along.
High schooling in India is significantly tougher and more difficult than in America. College in America is actually much better and tougher because they actually test you based on what you're learning and they independently allow you to learn. In India, colleges are good, but they're way too structured and it's almost allowing people not to think. And obviously, we emphasize science and math way more than what happens here in the U.S. So obviously, India, China, and the Asian countries are very, very strong in science and math, which is the fundamental for lots of things.
Oh, that's interesting. We have 2 dads here this week, and both have daughters, and one played Division I basketball and one played Division I football. And, they're in the film room and they're watching what we do and they're both loving it. It reminds me of a time I was doing a clinic camp for you, and there was a gentleman who was on the NCAA championship team for Villanova.
Yep, Harold Jensen.
Yeah, so the kid went home and said, "Hey, this coach doesn't even let us hit. We're not even hitting a ball." And as each night at the dinner table, the dad would say, "It sounds like our basketball practice." So he asked if he could come and spend the final day. So that was a really fun experience. But I told these two girls, they said, you don't really need to leave this technical station. I mean, you both have palm-up serves. You both have backswings that go 4 feet behind your back. Doesn't matter if, one's 11 and one's 17. It doesn't matter. Now with a new rule, so you think one girl, okay, she has her senior year coming up. Then you don't have to start till you're 19 now. Then you have 5 years. So it's like you have 7 more years where you could still be playing competitive tennis on a college campus. But with my question, when you mentioned families and divorce, I know I tease you that you won the lottery with a prearranged marriage. One of the best stories I've ever heard was Vijay Armitraj, prearranged marriage, and he's talking about how his wife, after the courtship, she knew nothing about tennis, but after the courtship, she was saying, "You got to work on your backhand." But with that, but what percentage of Indian families still are prearranged marriages? What's a ballpark?
Steve, I have no idea. I would say maybe 60%.
But when you really think about it, the parents probably would do a better job if you just had to flip a coin and say, well, yeah, the parents would do a better job.
Well, the other thing is, Steve and Dave, honestly, I don't know both marriages are successful. Sometimes they stay together because that's the society norm. Things are changing. But at the same time, I think what parents tend to do is the marriage is usually put together by a friend of the family or the relative of the family who kind of plays a matchmaker in between. That's been happening for centuries overseas. Even here, I mean, I call it the mainline, those very, very wealthy. I mean, they're very good at keeping the money together. So, it's called something else here, but there it's called an arranged marriage. So here it's called, let me set my son or daughter up with so-and-so. So this way we can keep things together. So they go out, if they end up, connecting, then they end up. So it's not unique, but yes, I would still say, I don't know the stats, Steve. Depends on the country. It's such a large country. I would say at least 60, maybe 70% is still arranged.
I don't open up myself for any shots. I mean, I am divorced, but Anderson, don't you think that your wife Janet could have done much better if she let her parents pick somebody else?
I mean, maybe Brad Pitt. Other than that, I think she did pretty well. I don't know. She climbed pretty high up on the ladder. I think she's good.
Yeah, we'll get back on track. But one of the last times I was with Vic Braden, I said, Vic, I'm out here to see you, but the number one reason I want to be discovered, and I think I could be the next Brad Pitt. And he still had it. He was in his 80s, and he said, maybe the Pitt. That was his comment. But
yeah.
But anyway, the Vijay Armitraj story, just to go through that, do you know that story? Do you want to tell that, Arvind?
I've just heard that story. It's the second, third hand information. Yeah, so I don't know the whole story.
Best story in tennis is that he hires Pancho Gonzalez, and he's done well. I mean, he's beaten Laver, and he's just he's cracking the top 20 in the world, and he tells Gonzalez is at Wimbledon. He said he's playing Rosa. Whatever you do, don't serve to his backhand. So he's nervous. He's on center court, and you could just tell the first time he didn't look up in the stands. Second time he looked up, and Gonzalez was just, the body language was negative. And he looked up the third time, and Gonzalez was leaving. So back in those days, no cell phone, but Gonzalez was at Caesar's Palace working as a coach, and so some time goes by, and VJ goes to, meet Pancho Gonzalez and say, you stranded me. Why did you leave me? You didn't stay at Wimbledon during the fortnight. And as the story goes, he was through like 3 days talking to, just waiting to talk to Pancho, and Pancho would not even acknowledge that he was there. So then finally, I guess it was the third day, he just turns and just starts swearing. I told you not to serve to Rosewell's backhand. But anyway, I think he's just, as you said, great for tennis. But I think of that was one of the all-time stories in tennis. But no, I actually asked the Indian, I just teased the couples. I goes, this is a pre-arranged marriage. But more often than not, there's definitely an influence. Definitely an influence. Let's go down the line. Let's talk about Julian. What an amazing man. Tina too. I've always said that I should hire Tina as my coach. When I get together with Tina, she says, you're still doing the same thing, and it's true. I'm still in the same lane, doing the same work, and not really reaching enough people. I mean, that's what she tells me. She's a sharp cookie, class act.
My observation with Tina and you both are the same people. You are Tina on the tennis court. You give it to us and give it to all the players. Exactly unfiltered. Here you go. And that's exactly what Tina did. And that's for you. Speaks the truth and takes out all the extra fittings outside. And she's so honest and she sees it with a very, very clear lens. Anyway, coming back to Julian, one of the most charismatic, successful human beings I've had the privilege to call him as my friend, mentor, my boss. He hates being called that. I never call him that either. And it's what he does on the court. But still loves the game. Hits the ball all the time. Patiently, like every ball machine galore. He just outworks everybody. And obviously, he brings the same kind of passion into the business. It's really the people. He's so charismatic, yet he's so clear how he approaches things. And, he can diffuse any situation of people. That's the greatest skill I think he has. And he really, he enjoys spending time with people. He's still at 75, I think he is, still learning, and constantly with computers, technology, name it. And he's figuring it out. And to work with him, work for him, it's such a privilege. And I say that wholeheartedly. And I've told him that I've had the best seat of being around him, learning in so many ways. And he's been a tremendous mentor, not just to me, to thousands and thousands of people, always giving them opportunities. So many visas have been sponsored and so many families have succeeded. It's him pitching a tent here in the Philadelphia region and just opening his doors for so many of us from South Africa, India, you name it. The immigrant mentality. Just give me something.
And yet, so much to credit to his partner, Adrian. We can come to that in a minute, but yeah, so cool. The bus driver, smile, charmer rattlesnake, just personality plus. But why don't you tell the listeners about Julian Krinsky, JKST, what was built in Philadelphia? The camp was amazing, just at a tennis level. I mean, easily, if it wasn't one, it was 1, 2, or 3. I believe it was the largest tennis camp. To go there and you're training almost 50 instructors. Tell us a little bit about what business was built there.
Well, Julian came to America with a young family from South Africa to be an accountant. As he was doing his accounting, he started to teach tennis. And he realized this was what he wanted to do, but he needed to feed his family. So he continued doing both. And then he needed somebody else to work with him. That's where Adrian comes into play. So Julian runs overnight camps because people want to come from other places. So they stay in his house, in his basement, here, everywhere. And then they get bigger, and then they go into different colleges. Haverford College being the most unique one. We were there for 42 years. At the peak, probably late 90s, I had hired 60 coaches. So you're talking about about 300 tennis players. I would say they may have been other camps, but we were probably one of the largest camps. And we had coaches from all over the world and kids from all over the world. And it was humming. We had, about, at that stage, Haverford College had 16 tennis courts. We had 6 at Gulph Mills and 8 at Narberth. So we rented so many other clubs and college campuses and high school courts. So we had a whole bus network. Meanwhile, what started as tennis, so Julian wanted to, this is where the entrepreneur is. He decided, what other sports would kids love playing? Golf. So we started a golf camp. Why not squash? Okay, because Northeast squash is popular. So while we're doing that, then he gets the idea, why not have a camp for kids who are not very athletic, but they want to do cooking and business and you name it, called the enrichment camp. So we started those camps. And then we combined them with giving them some sports opportunities. While we're doing this, then we start some day camps, just your regular middle of the road day camps where they played football, hockey, baseball, basketball, swim. So we had that running. And then Julian gets an idea. He starts a camp for, it's called a Yesh Shabbat camp. It's for modern Orthodox Jewish children from predominantly the Long Island, Massachusetts, Connecticut area, where parents send their children to learn more about their religion. And we offered kosher food and things like that. This is the entrepreneur in him. Now we get offers from places like Wharton, University of Pennsylvania's business school, as well as several business schools. Their professors are running these programs, but they need somebody to run the camping site because they have no idea. They just want to teach and they want to make money. So comes our business model is we provide their support. So at one point, we were running 19 different camps in 19 different places, including University of Michigan, MIT, you name it, we were there. Yale, Georgetown, everywhere. And so we kind of pivoted from tennis, not completely. So we started to cut down tennis a little bit just because, our popularity grew in other areas. So, that was our business model. And things started to come a little bit tighter as we approached COVID. And after that, we got out of everything else and we still are busy with tennis. Our clubs are doing extremely well. Our tennis camps are strong. Yet we no longer do the overnight because we're all at a different stage in our life.
Well, yeah, I think the COVID certainly tied in with Julian and Tina looking to retire as well. The timing of that.
It kind of coincided when 40-50% of our instructors and 40-50% of our students were coming from overseas. And 2020, 2021 was an absolute disaster. So at that point, Julian and Tina were looking to retire. And so we changed course, but the School of Tennis is still humming.
I think one thing of so many, you can make a list of 100 points, but where Dave Anderson, our listeners, Julian would have an on-court staff and an off-court staff. So if you were a tennis pro, you weren't 24/7. You weren't being a babysitter at night. I think that was different than most boarding camps. There's a positive and negative. Most boarding camps, it's 24/7. I remember an article in Tennis Magazine said if you could survive working a summer at a boarding camp, you could make it in the tennis industry. But Julian, he didn't have a staff doing both. Dave, you would know many people through Tennis Tech who worked for Julian, Adrian. Tell us a little bit about Adrian, because he was a big part of the whole business.
Absolutely. Adrian, also a very, very sharp mind, went to Penn and met Julian, teaching tennis. And Adrian, very passionate. He's a drill master. We used to call him Dr. Death because, you get off Adrian's court, you felt sick. Adrian actually spent a lot of time with Barbara Jordan, who ended up winning the Australian Open singles. And, Adrian was the nuts and bolts guy. he would have been an architect. I think he was studying architecture, if I'm right. Maybe I'm wrong. But he is, the yin and the yang. Adrian was the bad guy, bad cop. Julian was the good cop. But no, still today they're partners in a lot of their the property ventures and things like that. But Adrian was a phenomenal tennis coach. I mean, just 60 minutes of hard work. Drill sergeant, the Harry Hopman model. You never left his court not feeling, tired. You were exhausted, and he knew like if you had strong legs, you're gonna be fine. You're gonna do well. So a very, they were a beautiful tandem they are, and they still are. I had a conversation with Adrian earlier today about some, building projects. But anyway,
he's fishing in Montana, right? That's where he's retired to.
Well, he's in Chester County right now, but no, he does go to Montana or Wyoming, I forget, and then he loves his fishing and the nature. He's just he's from Pennsylvania, Johnstown, Pennsylvania, and he's also very successful.
Go ahead, Dave.
Steve, are we going to retire to Montana and California? That's my first question.
Yeah, I'm on the
Steve's never retired. Steve is never retiring, Dave.
I'm not either, actually.
I'm on the Mark Costello retirement plan. You're gonna work till you die.
Yeah, I think that's how it's supposed to be, actually.
Well, I mean, I certainly have this thought. Maybe it's a drop in the ocean, but we really need to help tennis. If we get around to that. Yeah, so I could see taking a little time off, but right now, just hoping to make more of an impact and improving how the game is taught. Let's go to Mark Spann.
Yeah.
He was a classmate of yours, right, Dave? You were at the same time at Tennis 10?
Yeah, that was actually going to be my real lead in. The retirement thing's a joke. Somebody asked me that I think 3 times a week, and it's different for everybody, but for me, I don't see myself ever really stopping what I do. But Mark, he was younger than me in terms of the time at tennis. He was a grade behind, but we hit a lot of balls together, spent a lot of time together. Tell us a little bit about Mark, your time with him, what an impact he had on you, all of the above.
Absolutely. Mark Spann is the reason why I'm here at JKST. So rewind March of 1990. I'm supposed to work at a casino in Newport or somewhere like that. A gentleman named Scott Zumwalt, and he needs a video. So I'm riding a bike at Erskine College. I fall off my bike because I missed something, and I thought I broke my left wrist. I was going to make the video. One of our film guys was going to do it, and I could not even pick up a ball with my left hand for at least a couple of days. So Scott was in a pinch because one of the board members, his nephew, was being pushed hard by him, and Scott couldn't hold any longer, even though I had a pretty decent resume as a player. And even coaching, I've coached at offense, defense camp and places like that in America. So Scott gives me the number for Adrian Castelli. He says, I used to work for those guys. They're great people. You probably are better off working there because if you want to teach tennis full time, they have a couple of tennis clubs and there would be a better situation than I am, even though the casino is great. So I call. Mark Spann is house sitting for Adrian and Molly. And we get talking, and I send him my resume, and the next week later, because it's a mail, right? So Mark calls me and says, "How would you like to come work for us?" I mean, just like that. So that's summer of 1990, and we hit it off very, very well. I knew so much about tennis teaching that I actually realized I didn't know a whole lot before I got there. Mark, whose mom was a former Wimbledon doubles champion, Anne Spann, and Mark was influenced by Anne being the son, and then obviously spending time at Tennis Tech with Steve, Dave and all you guys. I think Craig Tyler, he was there too at that time. And yeah, I mean, he was, I was so mesmerized watching Mark teach because he had a way with people. And so, I mean, he was larger than life at that stage. And then 91, I come back to teach. Even in 1990, Mark realized I had more skills than just being a coach. I was given a lot of opportunity to lead programs and things like that. 91, I started working full time. Mark works at the Narberth Club. I'm 7 miles across the way at Gulph Mills. And, you know, again, at that stage, he was still involved in camp. A couple of years later, Mark decides he wants to travel during the summer and work with a couple of players who were trying to make it on the tour. Jason Weir-Smith was one of them, and, you know, different people like South Africans. At that point, I take over the directorship of JKST. And, you know, we are very close friends and, you know, working together. We don't do a whole lot of things together yet. Mark is still our, I can call him our technical guru. And, you know, a few years later, Mark wants to come back. And this time, you know, the same guy who hired me is now, you know, he and I are co-directors of the camp because I'm the guy who gets the business in. Mark is the guy who's we had such a ball, not just reuniting our forces together, but we were the perfect yin and the yang. You know, we read a lot of leadership books together, you know, Mike Krzyzewski's coaching philosophies, Phil Jackson's books. We really enjoyed the team atmosphere. That's when we were at 60 tennis pros we had hired. And, you know, as time goes by, you know, Mark ends up getting a business opportunity. He pops in and tells us he's leaving, which was a big loss for us. But, you know, he had to do what he had to do. We stayed friends, very much so. And we would catch up ever so often for breakfast. You know, he would bring kids from his camp to hit with us. We'll do the same thing. We did a lot of things together. Even though the last few years we didn't have a lot of time together, it was more because of our busy lives, not so much nothing else. His passing was like a thunderbolt in my head. It's just like it was so blindsided. Even though we knew he wasn't doing great physically, but we figured it was just a question of time he'll get it right. But you know, it's a tremendous loss, not just for the tennis community. JKST was a big part of Mark's life, and Mark was a big part of JKST's life. So it was a tremendous loss. And on a personal level, you know, I lost a very dear friend, somebody who was very instrumental in me being in tennis, inspiring me as a coach, somebody who really ignited the passion for people. Julian has that, Mark has that. And, you know, I'm just a product of being around them and learning and absorbing it.
That's great. You know, Dave, reflect back, Mark, he spent a year with us, and then he went back home, and then he came back. So he did Tennis Tech. It's a 2-year program, but he did 1 year on, 1 year off, and then came back and finished the second year. But when he went back home, it was really amazing because his mother, Wimbledon champion, and they had a big business in South Africa. And I remember her writing me, and that was the time of getting handwritten letters. There was no emails and text messages and such, but then they did come and spent time with the system that we put together. They spent time with Vic Braden, and it was just amazing that someone, you know, Dave, you and I had a similar experience with Angela Buxton, who was a contemporary. She won a Wimbledon title either the year before or the year after Ian Spann. He was a big teddy bear, Mark.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. That was a wonderful tribute that was paid to him. There was a service. He should have had about 400 or 500 people in the middle of winter with a ton of snow. People came from California. His sister came from South Africa. And it was just, you know, it was his kind of crowd too. The same as he wasn't there. He would have just been popping around saying hello to everybody and anybody. And, I would say one of the finest tennis coaches. I'm talking to two of them on the other side of the phone, but I would say, this is so much contribution to the greater Philadelphia area, the tennis community. It was just very sincere, just authentic.
Like you, one of his close friends, Ollie, talked to him about there'd be some tribute to Mark, to carry the torch. So someone like that is not forgotten. Dave, if you remember, we coached him. I
remember it well.
We ran the team on inter basis, and he was a very good player. But Mark loved his food, and he'd look at a potato and get a little bit, you could say, Spann, you look at a potato and you're going to put weight on, and, no, just have your potato plain. And I'll never, I used to give him a hard time, my locker room humor. Spann, are you sure you weren't adopted? And, mother's a Wimbledon champion, but I remember, you can do this with players on the road, is that, here's your money, go to the grocery store. And he's eating a bag, it's little fruities. I go, Spann, you got to read the label. But no, he played really well. He had a very complete game, and he was very passionate about the sport. Yeah.
Good guy.
Let's move on. Tell us, you got a love for numbers. Tell us about that.
Yeah, I do have a love for numbers because it made a lot of sense. My brain is very logical. So automatically, I see things a lot differently with numbers. I basically played tennis. It was a numbers game. That's all it was. It was just like hit one more ball. It's not necessarily, I knew managing errors at a very, very young age. I think because I was a little bit older, I didn't play tennis when I was like 5, 6, or 7. I started then, and then I think I played my first tournament within a month after playing. Not that I knew a whole lot, but I just knew enough that if I managed my unforced errors, somebody's going to lose to me before I can start to beat them. So that kind of carries on to everything I do. I don't know whether it's right or wrong, but I calculate quite a lot.
Tell us what iPhone are you on right now?
What iPhone am I on right now? Whatever. Number 17 20. Pro, I suppose.
You when the number goes up, you just automatically switch phones?
I love technology.
Yeah, I bet you have 16.
I love technology because I often say to people, just because I'm Indian doesn't mean I'm in IT, but I do love technology products are the what I like to use.
You became a big fan of brain typing. Tell us about that.
Oh, it was really you, Steve. And absolutely. I think to understand that opened up a whole different door for me because it's not to pigeonhole people. It's really to make me understand, to teach tennis to everybody. The reception is so different. If you understand their brain type, you start to know how to feed it to them because one size does not fit all. And, it was you who really inspired Mark and myself to get involved with Need Noggle's book. And, then we made it a game. We'll literally sit there and start to bring down everybody. and until today, I use it a lot because I feel like it helps a lot because it's part of that whole philosophy, meeting people where they are. And this way, you can actually get your message to them in a way that they would receive.
No, well put. How about the USTA? I know Dave could comment years ago. He was part of different committees and such. Or you have been in the past. I mean, you have a long career of contributing time to the USTA. Why don't you share some thoughts on that?
Well, yeah. Many years ago, I figured, in life, I'm in a good place. And just like the two of you and all our listeners, we're all tennis nuts, right? I wanted to give something back to the game of tennis because I felt, with all the other noises that we have, I wanted, Julian always would say to me, oh, if we can crush every competition. And my thing was, Joel, if we're the last club standing, that means the game's dead around us. So we really need our competitors, because we need competitors so that we can compete. And that's what motivated me to get into. And also, I wanted to have a say in what we do, because, we can all hit the ball right. We can all coach. But we need to really help the flag bearers of our sport. And, that's really my involvement. And it's just a way to give back to the sport of tennis. Yeah, like anything else, there are pluses and minuses. But generally, I enjoy working with them. I learned a lot about, coaching has now finally become a priority. Coaching has never been a priority. And I have had my battles in my head with that, because I've said PTR and USPTA, now RSPSA, they did not have tennis as their main focus. They were membership-based organizations. For the longest time, I've been saying, if we want to produce better tennis players, the governing body needs to, have a say in it, because, we're not trying to grow pickleball or padel or whatever. We that's how you grow. I mean, I said this to John Embry. I said, John, you guys will certify anybody for any sport. And John said, that's not fair. I said, I can tell you what I can tell you. You guys used to be USPTA. Now you are RSPSA, Racket Sports. So really, my passion for tennis is the reason why I joined the USTA. And sometimes I run into some brick walls there, but most times it's, I think the game, at least the USTA is headed in the right direction. I think hiring Craig Kiley is a wonderful move. And, he's a tennis lifer himself. So I think I'll be okay.
Go ahead, Dave. No, that's great input. Thanks.
What committees are you serving on, or have you served on?
I am in the adult comp committee. So that's nationally. And locally, in the Middle States, I've chaired the junior competition committee for the last 6 years or 8 years, who's counting anymore. Those are my main things that I'm working with. It's very interesting. Getting into these committees is like a political move here. And there are a lot of great people who are there, but it's nice to know that how much work goes on behind the scenes. But the adult comp committee, which is awesome, because there's a say about all the tournaments, and there are so many tournaments for adults, and really it's nice to see older people, adults, playing so passionately. Leagues have grown. Now the junior comp committee, at least in the Middle States area, we're not the most competitive, just because we're not the warm region and we don't have the infrastructure. Everything is expensive. The junior. My philosophy is very simple, right? Everybody needs to be heard, and which we do a good job about, and also try to be as fair as possible. And I'm always preaching that, so I'm preaching that over there, and I have a nice group of people I work with. It's enriching, I have to say.
To Steve, something you used to say that is so true, and I have a large staff here, Arvind, and I tell all of them that they need feathers in their hat, in their cap. You can't really critique something till you've been at least a part of it at one point. And to get inside of our, USTA Texas Tennis Association, volunteer work on committees, do all of that. And at some point, I think it's very, very important for everybody to dip their toes in that water.
You hit it on right away, because this gentleman. He's from your area, a friend of mine from India, Anirban Datta.
Yeah, I know him well. Yeah.
Yeah. He has a friend from his hometown here, a very prominent coach. I won't mention his name of anything.
Saeed.
and he talked about...
He has a son that plays very well.
Very well, exactly. So he has talked about, he'll get into the USTA, I'll fix this, I'll fix that. And it's been said to him very quietly. I said, you know what? First join the committee, okay?
Yeah.
then you will realize how many balls that you're juggling, because it's not about, everybody has their own angle where they're coming out, right? The junior has its own angle, the adult comp has its own angle, the leagues have their angle, the CTAs have their angles. So with all these balls being juggled, and then you also got a diverse population playing it within your own district or your section. Now, some people say left, some people say right. So it's really a nice game. You're right. You said it so right. Dip your toe in, then you'll start to understand. Because often people think USTA means they run the leagues, they run tournaments. They don't realize how much more there is to USTA.
Yeah. No, it's a pretty diverse operation for sure.
Yeah, with Craig Tiley, obviously a daunting challenge with 17 sections. It's a big organization. Before we came on air, listeners, I was saying, it's we have to do something with Dave and Arvind, and having been part of what we do collectively, that you two have never met in person. Let me say a few things with Doug Cash, what he says about myself, which is flattering. He says, of all living people in the U.S., I have the largest coaching tree. And then I say, yeah, but most people in tennis, they don't even think about what a coaching tree is. With Mark Spann, when he passed, with family and friends and condolences, but selfishly, I was just thinking, tennis really lost out. He left us way too soon. But listeners, people like Dave and Arvind, Mark Spann would have been right at the top of the list. Another thing people say and don't know, that they may show up and I'm working with 12 kids that in a way, I mean, certainly you could say it's sensationalistic, but you could also say it's factual, that we have the largest junior program in the United States. And the caveat to that is, well, we have a curriculum. Who else has a curriculum? So I really do think that, Matt Clore, who works for the USTA, he asked me just the other day if I could send him a list of all the junior players we have that are doing well at what I would call the grassroots level. Some kid is, whether they finished second or sixth at these clay court nationals that recently took place. We have kids that are being very successful at it. It's not at the marquee level. It's not the ATP or WTA circuit, but I do think that you said it so well. I mean, I used to always tell people, well, if you want to criticize the PTR, join the PTR. You want to criticize the former USPTA, join the USPTA. And I think with the USTA, it's what people do collectively. But the key word is the first word. It needs to be united. Just last week at the National Tennis Campus, both on the recreational side and the player development side, is, phone calls were made and people were told not to have anything to do with us. And that's just because they're not educated. They don't really know the GreatBase is a system of systems, and they don't really know, like say, tell me about Big Braden math. Tell me about Bill Jacobson's math. It's just coming back to numbers. But with that, with coaching, let's do this, Arvind, go on to another segment. John Lucas, the basketball player, tennis player, you're a fan of other coaches. That makes me think of systematic coaching. It was just really a plan. And I think in many circles, a system is considered to be a bad word. But tell us about how you like to study other coaches and who some of those coaches are.
Absolutely. My fascination always was, what is coaching, right? Coaching is teaching. So whether you're teaching basketball, whether you're teaching tennis, whether you're teaching football, how are you? Are you going to fight physics? Because oftentimes, I call them the Instagram coaches. One of them has a very, he was Serena's coach for a while. He's been many people's coach for a while. This guy will put Instagram videos and literally contradict himself. And what really, why I study other coaches and other programs in other sports specifically is because how in depth they are. They're not just teaching; they're also managing people, and it's larger. It's managing a workforce. So that's what really fascinates me because, and there's a common theme. They are, they spend a lot of time studying film. And I feel like our industry is so weak on film because I feel like we are so embarrassed. We come up with every reason there is to come up with a reason. But I really think coaches are so scared to put their students on film because I think the proof is in the pudding, right? And meanwhile, all the other sports spend countless hours watching film because you want to learn the truth. You don't want to learn the myth. And that's that one message that I actually feel that I've learned. I follow Mike Krzyzewski, even though I like UNC. Go figure that one out, right? Um, Phil Jackson, and read like Bill Belichick for all his pluses and minuses. He's a great coach. In tennis, obviously, I have so many more personal connections with tennis coaches. Been watching golf swing instructors like Butch Harmon and Dave Peltz and the South African David Ledbetter. Just very, very. Sometimes I wonder. I should have spent more time following these coaches in person just to learn because Julian did something which I'd like to share at this point. Years ago, he goes down to Fort Lauderdale and he goes to this public court where Jimmy Everett is teaching Chris's dad. And he offered to pick up balls for Mr. Everett. And he did that because he wanted to know what is that this man was teaching in a public court and inspiring so many young boys and girls to become good tennis players. I wish I'd done that. I'd done that in tennis, but I wish I'd done that in other sports. And, wisdom much later in life, right? I used to coach Andy Reid's wife, Tammy Reid, tennis for many years. Well, I was too shy to ask Tammy, can I just go watch how Andy coaches? Now, I'm a Cowboys fan, so Dave, you should be, I know you live in Dallas. I'm a big Cowboys fan, so living in Philly, yeah, it's a very tough situation, right? But I was too shy. I should have asked Tammy, connect me with Andy. I would just be a fly in the wall. I don't need to be, no questions asked, nothing. I just want to stand on the side and I want to see how he deals with these rough and tough, amazing people. I did spend a couple hours talking to John Lucas. It was the most enriching experience. He had just come back from coaching Lori McNeil at the US Open. And one thing he said to me was, tennis don't want to hear reality, man. They just want you to tell them how good they are. Meanwhile, none of my basketball guys want to do that. They want to know where they suck at because they've been coached all their life. Tennis players kind of, it's the reverse, right? Tennis player hires the coach. So the boss is the player. The player can fire the coach at any point. Basketball, it's the other way around. LeBron could be fired by his coach if, he had the eye of the year of the owner. So it really, I missed my opportunity, but I continued to be fascinated. One of the things I started watching was I never liked soccer, even though I played when I was younger. I watched Pep Guardiola, Man City's coach. Now he's coached a lot of successful teams. Why is he so successful? Unbelievable. His eye for detail and how he puts his players in a position to win. So whether it's business or whether it's sports, I think that's why it fascinates me.
Oh, that's great input. I told the athletic director of the University of Florida, and all the best to Adam Steinberg. He was hired, but they were interviewing Matt Clore. And I just remember telling the AD, I was flattered that he had listened to some podcasts, he and his wife's a tennis nut. And I told him, I said, you always hire the best teacher. And, that was my selling point. I was putting forth my statement was, okay, Clore is the best teacher I've got a question to ask, but go ahead. You, Dave, go your turn.
Well, it's not really a question, just a comment, because, teaching, the transfer of information and then coaching kind of ties it together with the relationship aspect. And I think that John Lucas's comments, are very applicable to where the culture is in tennis today because of the unwillingness to hear the truth. So, Steve saying hire the best teacher, that just seems common sense to us, and it makes a ton of sense, especially, Arvind, you're logical, you said, and in this day and time in America, the feel-good person, which, may not be the best teacher, but in terms of coaching and having the relationship aspect, they may have that nailed down really, really tightly, really well. They're going to win out. And so there's got to be a blend of it. And I think that's where, pros that are coaching in the game, and I've mentioned this story before, where it was a lesson I'll never forget when I was put in a mock teaching situation when I was technically a student staff member for Steve at Tennis Tech, and he had me out teaching an adult Ken dance, I believe it was, and I, Steve wasn't supposed to be there. I was doing in the lab on my own that night in front of 80 kids, maybe 80 future coaches, and I thought I gave a great tennis lesson because I used every big word, and I must have thrown kinetic chain out there 50 times. But Ken dance, I don't think his heart rate ever got over 50. And I think at the end, there was only like 5 balls to pick up. And that's because I was having him talk to me so I could demonstrate. And the thing is, it was a terrible tennis lesson. And it didn't do anything for anyone. And I think that there is a blend to it. There is a blend to it. I mean, you have to, I'm not saying you have to schmooze people, but boy, you better get people. Like you were saying how Mark Spann and Julian and those guys understood people, and how you've made a life study out of learning what buttons to push, how your mom used to be able to push your buttons to get the job done. And I think that we as coaches, we really, we need to do a better job of that. We need to do a much better job of that.
I wholeheartedly agree with that, Dave. I mean, honestly, I feel like that's the trick I think we've all missed. As in many ways, we're all industry leaders, right? We do what we do, and we do what we do quite well. And to impart that blend is a course in itself. Yes, it's a life course. It's really, I think, lost is the art where people actually sat and watched other coaches, experienced coaches. I used to sit at Haverford College and watch Mark and Julian and teach. And to me, and I don't expect anybody to do that all the time, but I think somewhere along the line, we're so distracted with our devices and our life in general. I think we forget learning is an art, and it's missed a lot. And I really feel like it's got to go back to that. That's where you're going to find the blend of coaches, because so many new coaches have come through, and they sit there and watch. And 5 minutes later, you look up, they're on their phone. What are you learning? I mean, there's Julian picking up balls for Jimmy Everett back in the day. Why? Because he wants to know how he's delivering, what he's delivering. So yeah, that's a lost skill.
I think just, you said it with your time with Mark, where Mark, he went out and, was part owner of a tennis club, and you're both so busy. People do get busy, just so busy that you don't really have time to talk tennis. I remember having a conversation with Julian because I was fortunate to do the same thing with Jimmy Everett. I just remember like it was yesterday, Claire, his youngest daughter, she had just won the Orange Bowl in the 12s, and she was playing a tiebreaker. And the person that set it up was a friend of mine who was playing the tiebreaker, Vic Diamond. And she missed the first serve in a tiebreaker, and he was such a gentleman, but he just kept on her over and over again, in a very soft-spoken way. But, this, obviously to have someone like Krinsky come along and was so good, he was so respected. But I think to turn back and ask, how did that happen? How did somebody become so good? I think the backstory is always more exciting than the story itself. I think a lot of podcasts are about pro tennis, which is great, but how do you get to pro tennis? Let me ask you a question. Andy Fitz, a funny guy. I'd like to take credit for this. I'm going to put you on the spot, Arvind. What does, maybe I should give you a hint. There's Chipotle and there's Rompoli. What does that bring back to you? Does that make you think of anything that's funny?
U.S. Open 2016. When I was working with Rom and you and Andy came along, you guys were here working with our coaches and our players, and we all headed down to New York. Yeah, if Rom was going to win the U.S. Open, we're going to go with Rompoli.
Yeah, we even came up with slogans. It was R&R.
Yeah.
I need to come up with that list. I actually have it, but we had some fun with that because we're just thinking, well, if you win qualies and you win the U.S. Open, we got to have a fast food Indian restaurant. And he said, "Yeah, we'll call it."
There you go.
We'll call it Rompoli.
I even did the math for him. I said, you need to win, 7 matches in the main draw. That's 3 sets. That's 21 sets. And you need to win 6 in the qualies. All you got to do is win 27 sets. You got it.
I don't think his math was very good. He was so young. He was going to give you 40%, Andy 40%, and me 40%. So
yeah,
and he was
and then
that doesn't add up.
Yeah, listen, there's a guy. Which I realized I had an opportunity to spend about 5 weeks with Andy Murray. He was in Philadelphia rehabbing his hip before he ended up having surgery. And he was, they would come to Gulph Mills to practice because we were the closest location. And such a gentleman and so there for everybody. And I got talking to Jamie. What's his coach? Now I can't think of his last name. The guy with the beard who's actually working with Armitraj.
Jamie Delgado?
Sorry, Delgi. Jamie Delgado. I spent a lot of time with him. Andy with such a mind for tennis. And meanwhile, Andy believed in stats. Andy believed in getting film and things like that. And meanwhile, Rom, Steve, you remember it was second year when he lost to that lefty from whatever. You were charting that match. It was the 57th point in the match when Rom had made his first move to the net. And, I've charted so many matches for him. And unfortunately, great player, great kid. It just, had a big serve, just kind of finagled his way around and, got up to 111, which is highest ranking in singles and 48 of 50 in doubles. One couple of 250s with Rohan as his partner. So great career, still kind of hanging in there playing doubles. But the insecurities these guys have, just if he had the right mind, if he had actually taken information, life could have been so different.
Yeah,
we could have at least looked.
There's so many parts of that story. So our listeners, I remember I went with you for 2 U.S. Opens, and all the Indian players, all the players on the tour are pulling for him. They're all sitting together. And do you remember what I did where I went in the players' lounge and said, wait right here, and I came back and who he brought with me?
No, I don't remember that.
I'll give you a hint, the famous doubles player he played for so long just recently retired.
Famous doubles player? You're talking about Rohan?
Indian, yeah. Opana.
Yeah, Rohan. Yeah. We were sitting on the lawn over there by the side.
Yeah, so I go, you guys sit right here. I'll be right back. And I went in, found him. I said, hey, we'll wait 10 minutes, 20 minutes, 30 minutes, an hour. We'll wait. And he said, I'll be there in 10 minutes. And, he went for so long before he hit a topspin return. I remember he was going to really try to make some changes, but what happened was he bumped up where he made the Davis Cup team, and then his whole schedule changed.
His whole schedule changed, and he also, it was patience that he didn't have, and he just wanted to keep playing. He didn't like to practice. His idea of practice was play more tournaments.
Well, for our listeners, he won the National 14s. Tell me when I'm wrong. He won the National 14s. in India. His father has a business. He finds himself at an academy in Spain, and never played a junior tournament after that. He went the whole age of 15 without winning a match. But big guy, big serve, but he just needed to add a few things to his game. I mean, a great competitor, but if you got a hole in your game where you won't force. I mean, he had that run on the bad grass at Newport at one point. I remember my son Connor wasn't ready for it.
Yeah, he lost his
Stevie Johnson, right?
Yeah, he lost in 3 sets to Stevie Johnson
in the final.
I mean, Ram could hit a wide serve like nobody's business, and then it's one of those ATP 250s. I think they no longer play that as a 250. They do a challenger, and then they call it a tournament. But no, he did. He had unfortunately he couldn't return on his backhand, and by the time he started to go forward, it was much later in life. At 6'2", huge wingspan, he could have been better.
No, for our listeners, my son Connor at that time, he's coming back from a bad injury where he had gone shoulder first into a net post, and Connor could flat out play doubles. Ram, I don't think he really even knew where to stand, but the idea was that the two of them to go on the road together because of the finances, and it is a war of financial attrition to try to make it in pro tennis. Let's just take a few more minutes. There's so many fascinating people. Tell us what comes to your mind with another friend of yours we had on the podcast. I read his book, The Aliens Among Us, Generation Z, I think it's called. Steve Robertson. What comes to your mind with Steve?
Oh my God, Steve. Yes, Steve is one of my closest friends in the world. He's a phenomenal guy. Started in South Africa, worked with us, and right now he's doing a lot of motivational speaking. He also trains executives, and he's also a pastor at a church in York, Pennsylvania. So Steve's a great guy, a great mind, good tennis mind, and coached a lot of players in South Africa, had a very successful business, and decided to move to America because things were not looking great at that stage in South Africa. I still think it's a little unsettling especially if you're Caucasian. And they don't live too far from me, about 6-7 miles. We don't see them as much, but still very, very dear and wonderful mind. And really shaped JKST for many years to take us through all those years when we were running camps at all those different colleges and universities.
Oh, there's so many people. Dave Anderson, we just talked to Aoife Wilson. She was part of the JKST family.
From Ireland.
Right, yeah.
Yeah. I worked with her in 1991.
Yeah, way back.
1991.
So many people. Carl Richards, he was so dedicated to stuff.
Carl is still with us. He's been with us almost 29 years.
That's something you could comment on. We could wind this down, but so many people worked so long for Julian and Adrian, Tina, the Krinsky extended family. Tell us why. You yourself included.
Oh yeah, I mean, very simple. It's first of all, it's immigrants. Second of all, we do what we want to do. We're not forced to do anything, and we all pursue what we want to become, and that's Julian's management style. And he's been out of the picture for almost 10 years now. And like I said, I've learned. Some of the guys I've hired, Kundan has been with us for 21 years. Nausher, who's from the Afzal Ali, Zishan Ali, his cousin, he's been with us for 30 years. And Andrew Waters, a South African guy, been with us for 20, I think. Carl Richard, like you mentioned, 28. And Gavin Finey, former Davis Cup coach for Zimbabwe, he's been with us for 20 plus years.
And even the off-court people too, right? Sorry to interrupt. The accountant.
Absolutely. Tim Farrell's been here longer than anybody. He's now part-time for the last 6 or 7 years. But no, I think it's really how Julian appreciates people for who they are. And also he allows us to become what we've all become, which is a great management style. Put people in a position they'll be successful and let them grow.
Yeah, I know a lot of other businesses are just the opposite way, is because when people stay on longer, you have to find ways for them to increase their income. So that's not so simple.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, our dear friend Mark Spann, who really believed in that, and when he went on his own, he struggled with that. He and I have had conversations about that. I don't know whether it's the financial pressures of running a business or not. Yeah, that was not, that was one of the things which he struggled with because, it's one thing to do it when you were, working for somebody else, but then there's another thing when you actually start to see what's going into the business, what's coming out of the business. So.
No, it's great.
It's really invest in people, and you'll have a successful business. That's really the message.
Yeah, people first, profit second. Let's go one more question each. Davey, baby, what do you got?
Well, that last comment, Arvind, it reminds me of a great saying I love. It's always painful to train somebody really well, see them leave, but it's more painful to not train them well and have them stay. And I think that I don't think it's a negative or a positive if people do, because not every operation can house everybody. And I think that at the same time, if people grow, they can get that glass ceiling, because I'm constantly, we have a large staff here as well, and I'm constantly asking people, do you want me to try to do you feel you're at a point where you're stimulated? Because it can be a plus and a minus tenure, Ken. I got quizzed on that very thing today by a member, and I said, I feel like I'm maybe 70% of where I envisioned Brookhaven could be. I had 34 years in October, but I really truly mean that, I think what it sounds like to me, what a beautiful situation you've grown up in is you, in terms of Julian's environment, is you've had guidance, but you've had a lot of autonomy. Is that correct?
100%. 100%. I think that's really, that's so well put, Dave. And that's really how I treat our workforce, because I really feel that's when people flourish. And I've always been like that. My dad was exactly like that. He showed me the way, but did not micromanage me. And and so that is a lesson that I have totally taken to heart, even as a parent to our daughter. My wife and I have that approach. We really let her do what she wants to do. When I say let her, that's even a bad thing. We gave her the foundation. The rest is up to her to do what she needs to do. So, that's a life skill. I mean, my dad was very much like that, and Julian's very much like that. Yeah. So when I think USTA asked me this question, who are your two most, and I'm pretty sure I answered it exactly like I did. I said my dad and Julian, probably they had so many similarities, but they only met a handful of times. But I think they both taught me the same thing.
Yeah, that's great.
Autonomy. For our listeners, Dave spent 3 years in Tyler, Texas, in a neighboring town. He ended up running 2 clubs. So he had autonomy, but we were all working together. I think of Guy Weinhold with his wife Lisa. They met at Tennis Tech, and their daughter went on and became number 1. Where a group of us, they had their own clubs, they had their own agendas every day, but we were working together. There was a time in this is back in West Germany, northern section of West Germany. I felt like when I was there, I had more influence on a small part of And players went on and played on the tour that had more influence on tennis in a small area of northern Germany than it did in the U.S. One thing asking about Carpagam, your wife, scientist, conversations with her. I mean, field versus fact. I mean, I think that's one thing in tennis is that research and practice are so far removed. I mean, over the years,
Totally.
tell us about your wife and her work and the conversations you have, and how tennis is so far away from research.
Absolutely. She is. In fact, right now I'm looking at her. She's rekindled her hobby, which is to paint. Yeah, she is in biophysics. Works for GlaxoSmithKline. Does a lot of drug research. Loves the science. Does not like the all the bureaucracy that goes along with it. Spends a lot of time poring over research and then data, and then I know for a fact we in tennis do not use statistics because we're scared of statistics because it tells us the truth and we don't like the truth. We like to talk about it as, I do it on feel. We don't want to hurt feelings, right? So anyway, Abby, she's back at it too. She started to run again. She had some shin issues and whatnot, and we all love traveling. My wife, daughter, and I have, we are prolific travelers. The greatest thing in our 31 years I've been married and Priya's 25. We all hiked the Everest Base Camp in 2023. 11 days, got up to 18,000 feet.
Wow.
So that was our, and we do a lot of fun little things. So we like to travel, try different cuisines, learn more about different cultures. We don't do the traditional resort. We've never been on a cruise ship yet. We go stay in these places, eat in the local eateries, talk to locals more so than the tourists because it's so intriguing. So I guess in some ways that's my little research still going on. So that's who we are.
I was privileged to work with your lovely daughter Priya. I mean, she hit the ball really well. But one thing I want to say,
still hit the ball really well. Doesn't play enough.
No, she. You can tell she's so highly intelligent. I mean, I tell kids all the time they're highly intelligent, but are they clever? But that's where when people come to see me, it's a captive audience. They've been told to come and see me, so then they know what they're there for. But yeah, she went to George Washington. One of our students is now the coach at George Washington. But no, I mean, one thing I'd like to say is I need to come back and stay in your lovely basement. But what we should do is we need to have a plan. I mean, it's just getting you guys on the phone, and we need to have you guys are leaders. You, Dave. There's so many others. We need to let people know who's part of our network, and we need to try to be more united and just do a better job reaching out and trying to help the game of tennis.
Absolutely, Steve. I'd love to help and put this thing together because I feel like we have, we're missing opportunities here.
And, like Dallas is really Dallas is a big place. Philadelphia is a big place, and I mean that's where coming back to Julian's wife Tina being my coach. I mean, I been in touch with Dave Fish for many years, a Harvard coach, and he's the one who told me, and I use this line all the time, but Dave Fish told me that, Steve, you do a lot of good, but you have to remember good is the enemy of great. Because, I mean, tomorrow morning I'm going to be up at 4:30 and on the court, and it's that's a strength of ours is that we've got some kids that we have to just. In fact, there's two students that you had down here. They probably returned by now, but they took a little bit of vacation after.
Yeah, they're back. They're back. I just got a message from the mom. They absolutely thanked me for sending them your way, and the girls absolutely. I knew they were the right type of kids too, and so I'm so thankful that they they were able to follow up and do that. And yeah.
No, a side story that Mark Spann, he would send me students, but he would only send students he knew that were just passionate and they would grind it out. So it just happened that he had a dad call me, and I talked to the dad, and the dad had sent. He was just going to send Mark had recommended that one child come and see me, but the dad had a conversation with me, and next thing you know, 3 kids are coming, and I talked to Mark, and he went, "Oh," because he just knew it's like this is all business. We're going to get up every day, and it's total immersion, and we always tell kids, how's it go? We film at the end, whether they're here for a week or 3 weeks, whatever. And the operation was a success, but the patient died, meaning that we do the pre-post, but are they going to go home and work at it? But, let's just have a closing word. Go ahead, Dave.
Well, I think it's been a lot of fun getting to know you over the phone, Arvind, and really appreciate the passion you can hear in your voice and the wisdom, and I look forward to connecting with you in person somewhere down the line, hopefully sooner rather than later. And just wanted to say thank you for your time tonight. It's been a pleasure.
Oh, likewise, Dave. I've heard so much about you from so many different people and resources, and you offer a wealth of tennis knowledge, and it's great connecting with you. And Steve, as always, I love your passion. God, we need more of you in this world.
No,
thanks for having me. It's a pleasure, and we can talk tennis forever. So we'll do it in my basement.
Yeah, but this has been outstanding. Thank you. I know the listeners. We always say you have a tennis treasure chest, and we're trying to help you put some golden nuggets in it. But your wisdom and your background, your journey, so many great things. But all the best to you and your family. We'll connect shortly. But Dave, as always, thanks for your time, and listeners, thanks for your time. And as we say, another podcast, another podcast in the books. Adios, amigos. Good night.
All right, guys.
See you guys.
Have a good night.
Have a good night.
Thanks, everybody.